Me running. Hey guys, Kevin with MAPerformance here, coming at you with another video. You may have seen our previous video, the pros and cons of modifying your Civic Si. If you haven't, go check that one out and come back to this one. Today's video, we're gonna go a little bit more in depth and look at, as the title states, some of the costs and a breakdown of what it takes to modify your Civic Si. We're gonna try and break this up into different categories depending on how much you're looking to spend and what your plans are with the car. Keep in mind that these prices may change over time due to inflation, deflation, all of that fun stuff. And of course, as always, we do price match any of our competitors, so if you see these elsewhere, give us a call, shoot us an email, and we would be happy to price match anything for you. If you've already purchased your car, or you already have a list going of what you want to modify on the car, don't tune out too early because we are going to cover a few things beforehand, but stay tuned because we'll get right into that. So if you haven't bought your car, the first thing we're going to talk about is the market. Now, as of everybody knows right now when this video is released, the car market is kind of crazy. So these prices may be a little bit different, and you're probably going to see some different variances throughout as well. So as of right now, you can usually pick up a bone stock Civic Si in either the 4-door or the coupe for right around $20,000. Now, if you are lucky, or maybe about a year ago, you could pick one up for about that $17,000 mark. Of course, there are some out there that are a little bit higher priced as well. As far as finding one, it shouldn't be too difficult because there are plenty of them out there. It really is just going to come down to if you have some certain specs that you're looking for, whether you want that awesome blue, red, green, whatever your flavor may be. As always, I would suggest picking up a fully stock car. That way you know exactly what you're getting into, and chances are the maintenance has been done. If you jump into an already modified car, you may save some money on the upfront cost of modifications. However, you always risk getting into something that somebody either beat on or didn't take care of, or just plain and simply didn't modify it well. So that would always be the route that we go. However, if you find a smoking hot deal on a full bolt-on car, probably not that bad to jump into either. All right guys, so jumping right into the modifications here. As mentioned previously, of course, pricing may change, and as a disclaimer, it really depends on what you're looking for in your car. Not every single modification is going to be the right one for you or for your goals for the car. If of course you have any questions on that or are trying to figure that out, be sure to give us a call or shoot us an email and we can certainly help you out. Now, as your first power adder on really any of the modern day cars, the Civic included, the first thing that you're going to want to look to do is get some sort of tuning device. In this case, the K-Tuner has really become the go-to as far as tuning goes, and one of those will set you back about $700. They do have one that's a little bit cheaper if you don't want the cool heads-up display and touchscreen. I, of course, would always suggest going that way because I like screens in my cars. As far as the tune goes, there's plenty of companies out there like ourselves that will offer a stage 1 tune, which is for a completely stock vehicle with the purchase of the K-Tuner, and will typically get you somewhere around an additional 30 to 40 wheel horsepower and about the same in torque. A pretty noticeable difference for not that much money. Moving on from there, the next step pretty much everybody goes with is going to be an intake system. Now there's not a whole lot of performance with the intake system itself, besides those sweet turbo sounds. And let's be honest, who doesn't like that? From there, we're gonna be looking at the opposite side of the turbo, of course being the downpipe, and on the Civic, it would be the front pipe as well. This is gonna allow the turbo to flow a bit more air. This, in combined with the tune that you also get with the K-Tuner, will net you a significant amount of power. Again, it really depends on which tune you're running, but generally speaking, we're gonna see somewhere around that 50 wheel horsepower and right around that as far as torque goes as well. It is worth noting on that you can split it up. Some of the aftermarket exhausts, such as the AWE, will come with a front pipe already in it, so you wouldn't need it in that case, and you'd be looking at just the downpipe, which is right around that realm of about $500 to $600, give or take. From there, we're gonna jump into some of the things that are gonna be more so for a track-specific build, or if you're just looking for something that you're going to be streeting and want to also occasionally drive on the track. The first thing is going to be taking care of the cooling system. Now, the oil cooling system on the Civic is sufficient for most basic track cars and of course street cars as well. However, when it comes to the intercooler, we find that it is quick to succumb to excess heat and of course lending us to less power. So that's going to be next on the list. If you want to skip the charge pipes and just go with the intercooler, you're going to be looking at about that $500 to $600 range. As far as performance goes, again, it's really going to be dependent on the tune that you go with. What I will say on that is you're going to see a lot more consistency in those numbers, especially if you're track driving. You're not going to have to worry about overheating and losing power and heat soak, that kind of thing. That's going to be it as far as power goes for this kind of first mild build. But moving on to some of the other components that you might also consider at this stage would be something along the lines of a good set of aftermarket brake pads. Now, the Civic from the factory does have, adequate stopping. Of course, compared to the base model, it's amazing, but there's always room for improvement. And a set of aftermarket pads that are street friendly will allow you to really push the car a bit more than you can from the factory. And of course, they're also going to perform on the street and not be too dusty, because cleaning your wheels from brake dust sucks. All right, so as far as the brakes go, we covered that. Now, this next piece, really not something that you necessarily need to do. However, it is extremely popular, even maybe the first thing that you do to the car, but I just wanted to mention it. Most people will also put a catback or some sort of exhaust system on the car. I left that out from the power mods because you don't really get any extra power, but you certainly do make the car sound good. Now, I know everybody in the comments right now is probably typing really angrily about you're missing something, you're missing the most important thing. And don't you worry, I'm gonna cover that right now. We're of course talking about the clutch. The clutch has quickly became the weak point in the Civic Si. Most people finding that even with just a basic stage 1 tune, the car is making too much torque for that stock clutch to handle and end up needing one within a couple thousand miles. So it is something that if you're looking at really doing anything in terms of adding power to the car, you're gonna wanna cover that right out of the get-go. Again, there's a big price difference depending on if you want to stay with the dual mass flywheel or go with an aftermarket unit, but for this video, we're going to say right around, again, $850 for a quality clutch system. There's a couple other components in there that you can look into when you're doing the clutch, such as a clutch master cylinder upgrade. Now, fortunately, we don't sell them here, but there are a couple out there on the market. I would also suggest looking into one of those because of the extra pressure in the clutch system. Now, when you take that number in comparison to what you paid for the car and put it up to something, say, the Type R, you have a pretty good bang for your buck. That price, of course, assumes that you're going to be doing all of the work yourself. If you are going to have a shop do it, you're going to probably be looking at another $2,000 to $2,500. Of course, a lot of that depends on where you're taking it, what the shop rate is, but as a ballpark range, $2,000 to $2,500. Now, what do you get out of that? Well, you're going to get an awesome driving car, a significant amount more torque, and a good amount more power as well. Typical builds along this list, somewhere in the neighborhood of about 240 to 260 wheel horsepower and about 280 wheel torque, which is a pretty significant jump, especially when you compare it to Civic SIs of the past. On a scale of 1 to 10, you're going to be sitting at right about the 8, but overall, still a fantastic daily driver setup. All right, if you made it this far, hold up for just 1 second. We here at MAPerformance are celebrating our 15-year anniversary as a company, which is a huge achievement for us here personally, and we want to thank all of you for the support throughout the years. In order to celebrate our 15-year anniversary, we're pulling a full Willy Wonka 10 mil golden socket giveaway. Now, I want to make some clarifications because some people have been receiving silver 10mm sockets, and that's just our way of saying thank you. However, you're looking for the gold 10mm socket. We're giving these away to any order that is placed now through the end of September, and any dollar amount qualifies to enter. All you have to do is visit MAPerformance.com, give us a call, or place an order online. You'll be entered to win a $1,500 MAPerformance gift card. so that you can continue to building your Civic Si with all the awesome parts in this video. We also have some awesome new designs for our 15-year anniversary going on to t-shirts, with all of the proceeds of those going to Direct Relief, which is a disaster relief organization. So order today for your chance to win, and check out the website for more information. All right, so back to our regular scheduled content here, where of course we're moving on into the second category, which we consider kind of our medium build. This is for people that maybe have some faster friends that they want to keep up with, or are getting a little bit more serious about some competition track driving. Now, of course, the first thing that you're going to be looking for is more power, as always. And some of the easiest ways to get to that would be through the use of something like ethanol. So the first thing that we would suggest is looking at a flex fuel kit to be able to run E30 or up to E85, depending on your fueling mods, and we'll get to that in just a second. When you consider the bang for buck that you get when running something like ethanol, it is a pretty easy expense to spend. Usually you're gonna see an additional 15 to 25 wheel horsepower with the same modifications that you already have on the car, simply by adding some ethanol. So for some of you that are looking for even more power, you're going to be at the limit of the stock turbo at this point. So the next logical step, of course, now that you have all of those supporting mods from the previous step, is going to be a larger turbo. Now for this one, you're going to be looking at sticking with a stock frame turbo, meaning all of those parts that you already have are going to be compatible. For that money, you are going to get an additional anywhere from 50 to 75 wheel horsepower and similar amounts of torque. To go with that bigger turbo, you're going to want to make that engine bay look a little bit better, and of course get more power as well. So something that could go in our mild build, but we are going to put it in our medium build for this video, would be an inlet pipe. This, of course, is going to be kind of that crossover pipe that goes from the turbo to your intake that sits nicely over the turbo. Now, from the factory, they don't look all that good, and there is a little bit of restriction. As far as on a stock turbo, not a big deal, but when you are talking about a bigger turbo, size does matter. So getting a little bit bigger of a diameter piping in there is going to allow more airflow, and this in conjunction with the turbo is going to obviously net you more power. Now this on its own isn't really going to get you an additional power gain, but in conjunction with that turbo is where you're really going to see the power, and of course it looks a lot better. As mentioned previously, fueling at this step is going to be just about maxed out, especially if you're looking at running any more than about E30, which is going to be 30% ethanol content. So if you are still looking to go for more power, you're going to need to upgrade the fuel system. And on the Civic Si being a direct injection engine, you are going to be looking at a almost complete fuel system upgrade. This is going to include many of the components such as the low pressure fuel pump, the high pressure fuel pump, the fuel feed line, as well as the injectors, or if you go to a port injection system, which is also going to allow you to run, of course, auxiliary injectors, which then you're also going to need some sort of standalone ECU to run them. So just as it sounds, this is a pretty spendy step, and if you're going to go this far, you need to be serious about making some good amounts of power. We did this step here on our own shop car. Of course, we had a world record holding Civic Si on the stock block, and this was running a port injection system, so we had 4 additional injectors in there. Now, this kit is going to include many different components, and unfortunately there's not a full complete kit on the market quite yet, although keep your eyes out because we do maybe have one of those coming in the future. All right, so now that we have the power and the fueling covered, some of the other things to consider at this step, especially for you track guys, are going to be keeping things nice and cool. Now, we've already taken care of the intercooler, so that leaves the oil system. So at this step, we would suggest an oil cooler as well, especially again if you are doing any sort of track driving. Now there's a couple of them out there on the market, however, we would suggest, of course, our own MAPerformance, but that is because of the unique design that actually allows the oil filter to be tucked up underneath the splash guard so that you don't have to worry about bottoming it out and breaking your oil filter off, which, let's be honest, is pretty catastrophic. Trust me, I would know on that one. So now that you have all that power and things are staying nice and cool, you might be wondering to yourself, can I actually stop and make it around this corner in time? although the stock system with those upgraded pads is great for the occasional track day and street use, when you get a little bit more serious into track day, everybody knows you can always do with more brakes. So at this step, we would also suggest looking into a big brake setup, although there's many of them on the market. Now that is of course going to include bigger front and rear rotors and calipers as well, and most of them are also going to include pads. You may want to switch those out if you have a preference on there also. To go along with those big brakes, you may also consider going with some suspension components. Of course, these can be done at any step of the build, but for this case, we are going to put them in our medium build for a more track day focused car. Keeping on with the track day theme, you may also look into some other suspension components like sway bars or end links. A sway bar kit for the car does drastically improve the handling and can help you shed off those extra seconds around the track. Now, with all of these components in this medium build, notably the fuel system and the turbo, you're going to need to have the car tuned somehow. Now, unfortunately at this step, there's not too many off-the-shelf tunes, so you are going to need to go with a Pro Tune, whether that means bringing it to a dyno shop or having it done through the internet because it's 2021. Pricing is going to vary depending on where you go, but $1,000 give or take is what we see when it comes time for tuning. You can expect somewhere in the neighborhood of about 350 wheel horsepower. If you go with a bigger turbo, you might be able to push that. However, most of those stock frame turbos are going to max out at about that 400 horsepower range. Now you can save some money by doing all these modifications yourself. However, at this point, we would start to recommend looking into having the shop, especially if you are doing a dyno tune, also do the work. This is likely going to run you somewhere around $2,000. Now, as far as drivability goes, there's not a huge difference overall. Again, the clutch probably the biggest thing that you're going to notice, and those coilovers that you go with might be a bit stiffer. So on a scale of 1 to 10, you're going to be looking at about a 7. Alright guys, so full disclaimer, at this point to the next step, you're really going to be kind of in the deep end and not in a bad way if you want to be racing Corvettes around the track or around your town if you're into that kind of thing. However, at this point, the car is going to be pretty much a straight up race car and not the funnest to drive on the street. Doesn't mean that it can't be, it just may not be that fun. We're of course getting into what we consider our hot build. Now the first thing at this step that you're going to be looking at is a full engine build. Now we were able to push our little 1.5T to about 550 wheel horsepower before we started to have some issues. So for the sake of things, we're going to call that 500 wheel horsepower about a safe limit. If you're looking to go for any more than that, or you want to be safe with a little bit less power, you're going to be looking at having a built block put in there. Of course, rods, pistons, and all of the goodness that goes into it. For one of these, you're going to be looking at the realm of about $3,500 to about $5,000, depending on if you have a core that's going with it, and of course the components that you use on the inside. But this is a small price to pay when you consider the reliability that you get when you go with a built engine versus taking the chance on what came with it from the factory. Of course, to take advantage of this new built block that you have in the car, you're also going to need some additional power adders. This is where a full turbo kit is going to come into play. Now, when you go to a full turbo kit, you're going to be able to run a significantly larger turbo. However, a lot of those components from the first two steps aren't going to apply to this because of the location change of the turbo and the actual orientation. So keep that in mind that you may be able to recover some of the cost if you sell some of those other parts that you had previously. Again, depending on the turbo that you go with in the kit that you choose, the price may vary quite a bit, but around $4,500 to $5,000 is what you can expect for a good turbo kit on the market. And of course, power is going to be significantly different depending on the turbo size, anywhere from about 450 up to about 650 wheel horsepower. If you haven't done so already, at this point, the full fuel system is going to be a must. As far as stopping the car goes with all that additional power, the brake setup that you have from the previous step should be adequate if you haven't done so already. Some of the other components that we would suggest at this point would be a aftermarket oil pump, because they are known to fail on the 1.5T, especially when you get to those higher power levels. It is actually exactly what happened on our car. It seems like the oil pump actually made the rods bend instead of vice versa, which is kind of interesting. So something that you may want to do, and isn't a bad maintenance item that you can take care of right away on your Civic Si. Of course, once you put in a new built block and a turbo kit, you are going to need to have the car completely retuned. This is where a Pro Tune is really going to be the only route that you can go. More than likely, you're going to want to bring the car to a dyno to have the tuning done there. Now, this is going to vary depending on where you go and the shop labor rates, but you can expect somewhere around the $1,000 mark for the tuning, if not a little bit more. If you decide to do the work yourself, you certainly can save some money that way. Just make sure that you know what you're getting into before you dive off the deep end, because it can get a little overwhelming quite quickly at this step. Some last things to note when you're at this step here is that you also may run into some issues with the transmission and the clutch. So depending on which clutch system you went with previously, you may need to upgrade that as well to hold more power, although certainly not necessary, again, depending on which one you have and your power levels. Another thing that we have found with these Civics is the gear set that is in them sometimes has issues with some of those gear stripping. So if you run into that, you may also want to plan for having a gear set put in, which is going to run you about $1,500, and also not a bad thing to have a shop do. So add that into the cost if you are having the shop do it. So you might be asking yourself, how much power is that 15 to 20 grand going to get me? And the answer, as always, is it depends. You can probably plan on somewhere around 450 wheel horsepower up to about 650 wheel horsepower, depending on the build, which is plenty enough when you consider how light the car is. As far as drivability goes, at this point, as I mentioned, you are going to be looking at more of a race car setup. So on a scale of 1 to 10, you're going to be looking at about a 4 or a 5. Again, a lot of this has to do with the clutch that you put in the car, but I can tell you that our car gets trailered just about everywhere that it goes because it is not fun to drive on the street. All right, guys, well, that's gonna conclude the video in terms of all of the steps of the build. Something important to note, I know a lot of you guys are probably scratching your head at these power levels that I'm throwing off, but a lot of that has to do with the build that you're going with, where you're dynoing the car, who's dynoing, or what type of dyno. So take it all with a grain of salt, but this is in general what we've seen with some of these modifications on our own cars as well as customer cars. Cars are no doubt expensive, but with the right parts and the right knowledge, you can make sure that you are getting the best bang for your buck depending on your build goals. As always, if you have any questions on what you're looking to do, you can always give us a call or shoot us an email. I want to thank you guys for watching today's video. And if you have anything that you'd like to see in the future or any platforms that you'd like to see us feature, leave a comment down below. Of course, as always, make sure you hit that like, comment, and subscribe button and turn on that little notification bell so you can stay up to date on all the videos that we have in the future. Thanks for watching, and peace out.